Hello, and welcome back to Delgado's ESL program, Level 3-4. This week's topic is community action. We're going to focus on using a comma to connect two ideas as one, and also we want to use the present tense and future tense in complex if-then sentences. So complex sentences have an independent and a dependent clauses, and those clauses are connected with an adverb, such as if, because, unless, before, after, although. Right? When the connecting adverb is in the beginning of the sentence, you must use a comma to separate the clauses, right? So if you look at our example sentences, some of them have commas and some don't. That's because of where the adverb is. Before you go to bed, comma, you must brush your teeth. The adverb comes in the beginning of the sentence, so I need a comma. But in this sentence, I teach because I love it. I don't need a comma because this adverb is in the middle of the sentence. If you study hard, you will succeed. We all know that to be true, don't we? The adverb is in the beginning of this sentence, so I need the comma. Right? This slide just kind of shows that a little bit more. Take some time to maybe write this down in your notebook and study it. So we're going to talk today about the present and the future tense, focusing on the word if. So if the weather is nice, we will go swimming, right? So at the present tense, we might ask ourselves, is the weather nice? Well, at 8 a.m. in the morning, perhaps? Well, yeah. So let's head out. And maybe by 10, we'll be at the pool, right? So the present to the future. Now, and then forward from now. When we use the present tense, just as a quick reminder, we do need to make sure that if we're using the verb to be, we use the proper version for the subject, am, are, or is. And remember, when you're doing your regular verbs, if the subject is plural, you will not need the S. But if it's singular, you are going to need to add an S to the end of the verb to have your subject and your verb agree. All right. So for the future tense, we'd have our subject plus the helping verb will plus our base verb, right? So I will go to the store tomorrow. You will see her soon. He will watch TV, right? So even though we would say, normally we would say he watches TV, when I'm using the future tense, with that helping verb, I don't have to add the S to the end of my verbs, right? So your teachers will be working on that lesson with you in your conversation class, right? During this lesson, and we'll go through these rest of these slides pretty quickly, we're going to look at some organizations in our community, and we're going to use the present tense and the future tense to create complex sentences. And we have some different organizations for you to look at and some sample sentences. We won't read them all to you right now, but you should look at these sentences before class so that you will be able to discuss them with your teacher and your classmates. All right, that's the end of part 1. We'll be back for part 2 in just a second. Thanks, y'all. All right, welcome back to part 2 of ESL 3-4. This week's topic is community action. We're going to talk about how do you find help and give help in the community. And you want to use the present tense and the future tense in complex sentences. So our community is here largely in Orleans Parish in Louisiana, and there is a lot of help that people give out in the community. And we're going to take an opportunity to practice our English and find out about some resources that are available. So here's our vocabulary for this week, just very quickly. You should take the time to write these words down. in your notebook and use them to in your discussions with your classmates. This week we've left two definitions for you to find yourself. The first one is organization. Can you define that yourself? And interest. We don't mean interest as in a bank, like how much you, or your credit card, how much you're charged for interest. We mean as a when people share an interest, right? So a community of with a shared interest. How do we define that, right? So we're going to go on a journey today with a man named Jim. Jim lives in New Orleans. He has not been working much since the beginning of the pandemic. But that doesn't mean he hasn't been busy. He has a long list of errands to do today. Here's Jim's list of things to do. These are all things he has to do in the community. Jim needs a payment plan for his bill. He will call the billing department after he finishes reading chapter 2. If he gets a plan, he will have more time to pay. Jim applied for assistance last week. He did not qualify for assistance. Jimmy Jr. needs a laptop for his online classes. So Jimmy Jr. and Jim go to Big Easy Middle School. After the teacher finishes sneezing, Jimmy Jr. and his dad will sign a contract promising not to mess the computer up. Jim is broke. He is happy the school will lend a laptop to any kid that needs one. Next, they go to the eye doctor. Jimmy Jr. doesn't want glasses, but his dad said, if you can't see the board, you will not understand the lessons. Jimmy Jr. said, classes will be online, Dad. I won't need to see the board. Jim frowned and said, you are going to get glasses. Dr. Johnson said, remember to watch out for eye strain. Too much time on screens can damage your retina. She's so helpful. After they left the eye doctor, they went to get gas. Jimmy Jr., after we finish here, I'm going to take you to Andre's house to play. Jim volunteers with Nola Newlight. Jim thinks that if he takes Jimmy Jr. with him, he will never have a chance of being hired by the organization. After dropping Jimmy off, Jim arrives at the family's house. The family's house is beautiful. They want to change out all their light bulbs for new ones. Before Jim gets to work, he will need to conduct an inventory throughout the house. The family will not pay for the light bulbs. Several philanthropists, some public grants, and volunteers support this community program. Jim has some extra cans of tuna. Jimmy will not eat them, so he is going to drop them off at the mini food pantry. After that, he will go into the chapel and say a prayer. When Jim met back up with Jimmy, he took him to the park. In the early evenings, Jim and Jimmy Jr. go to the park. Usually they feed the geese and talk. But today, Jim has a surprise. They will visit the sculpture garden. Jim is disappointed when they reach the sculpture garden. There are many other people there. So Jim and Jimmy will have to put on masks. I guess community will be different from now on, says Jim. But tomorrow will just be another day to complete errands. All right. So that's just a quick little story. Hope you liked it. Look at it for present tense with your classmates and your teacher. And in your class, talk about this tomorrow's to-do list. These are the things that Jim will do tomorrow. He will visit Barry. He will buy lottery tickets, etc. Also, complete this check for understanding before you have your class. Just fill in the blanks with the answers showing that you've understood the story. And these questions are true and false. Also read them to be prepared to discuss them with your classmates. And then the last thing that you can use to elicit some conversation with your classmates is to look at these images about how the weather will affect your plans. So if it is windy, How will that affect your shopping? Will it affect your shopping? If it's raining, how will that affect your motorcycle ride? Will it affect it? Have that conversation with your classmates. All right, thanks everybody, and see you next time. Have a great day.